Welcome to the fifth and final episode of Pathmakers, an interview series on the people who make and shape a country. Today I'm joined by Samya Arif, who is a Karachi-based artist, DJ, and part-time professor at the Indus Valley School of Art. In this episode on popular culture and art, Samya and I talk about her work, her influences, and her vision for Pakistan as an artist. I hope you have fun listening to our conversation. Samya, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Pooja. I'm really happy to be here as well.
So let's get started. Samya, if you could tell me, what have you been watching, reading, or listening to lately?
I used to be a big reader before, but unfortunately, because life has been so busy, I haven't been able to read much lately. Although I did buy some books, and maybe I can show you. I just bought this book recently from a very famous bookstore in Lahore while I was visiting Lahore after quite a while recently. And this is like a graphic novel, and it's called Louis Undercover, and it's like a French graphic novel, but it's been translated. Sorry, it's a bit dusty here, but it's really interesting. I'll just quickly go through the pages. Like, it's all these drawings, black and white. I hope you can see them.
Yes, I can. So very interesting.
Yeah, and it's about a dad and a son, and like, I think their life together. I'm just starting it, but it's something that I've been reading these days. And about the other things, I think you mentioned music, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Music. So musically, I think this is something that I would love to talk about even, is that I'm really inspired and influenced by my partner. His name is Talha Asim Wynne. We've been together 14 years now. We were together in art school, and apart from being a designer, and I think he's a bit of an artist too, but he's mostly like primarily a musician. So when we were in art school, he was really into rock music and indie rock music. And I think when I met him, he kind of opened this whole new world of music that I hadn't explored. Like, I used to like rock music as well, but I think I was more influenced by like punk rock, because I'm born in the 80s. I'm an 86 born. So by the time I came in the 90s, like stuff like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and, Perfect Circle, these were bands that we would listen to. But when I met him, he introduced this genre of rock music called shoegaze music to me. And then he even formed a band, and him and his bandmates would make music that sort of encompassed this genre. And it's just a really beautiful, sort of noisy kind of version of rock music. And so I think because of him, because he's a musician and we've been together for so long, a lot of the music that he listens to is something that I'm inspired by. And over the years, like he was into rock music, and then he got into electronic music. Something really great happened back in 2014. There was this thing called the Red Bull Music Academy, which was this prestigious sort of organization that was sponsored by Red Bull, and it would each year happen in a different country. So he was selected for the Red Bull Music Academy in 2014, and it was a very sort of competitive academy, because I think thousands upon thousands of people applied each year, and only like a select 50 or 60 people were chosen, and he was one of the people chosen from Pakistan, and I think he was the third Pakistani to ever go for it. So now he plays electronic music, and he's very popular all over Pakistan. His name is Talha, but his electronic music name is Tollcrane. So if anyone would like to check it out, they could find him on SoundCloud and Spotify, of course. And a few years ago, we even collaborated on a project where I was making these artworks for my very first exhibition, like a proper exhibition, group exhibition in Karachi. And we both collaborated on that project. And basically I made the artworks, and then I had these ideas for the songs, and this friend of mine who loves to sing, and she has a beautiful voice as well, Huma her name is. And so she sang the songs and he made the music, and those songs actually kind of people really appreciated them. And even now, like a lot of times, even though I think that those songs were created around um, in 2017, and so even now people like are always asking me about those songs. And there was this one song that we made which got the most popular. It was called Fast Girls. And fast girls is this term that a lot of times in Pakistan it's used to sort of point at women who don't follow the society's culture and rules, and who basically independent women, or too independent according to society. So that was a term that people in my family often used for me, for being independent or wanting to be rebellious. So I kind of owned up that term. So that was a fun project to work on. So if we talk about popular music in Pakistan, I think electronic music is really picking up. And there used to be a collective by the name of Forever South, and I used to do a lot of designing and create their posters and artworks, and a lot of their work, that was used for the concerts, and for also like publishing the music and everything. But that's kind of now graduated, and everyone's kind of doing their own thing now. But whenever I get the chance, I love to collaborate with musicians in Pakistan. Over the years, I've even gotten to do a lot of album covers for musicians in Pakistan. So there's a really famous band by the name of the Mikal Hassan Band. I believe they've performed in India as well. And I think currently they also have a member. Their lead singer is an Indian woman who does ghazals and classical singing. So I've gotten to create an album cover for them as well. And right now, I think the younger music scene is also, because I think we've been in this scene for the past 12 years, if not more. And now I'm kind of older, and there are younger people coming up, and they're like, a new favorite of mine is Hassan Rahim. So if someone hasn't heard them, should definitely check him out. He's really, I think his genre for me would be somewhere between pop and R&B, and he's kind of created his own Pakistani twist of it. So it's quite interesting. And so I think the music scene is doing, like, people are doing these things independently in Pakistan. What's kind of sad is that we don't have many, these, we don't have like huge platforms other than Coke Studio, which everyone has heard from Pakistan. But, we don't have a lot of platforms for these musicians, and a lot of these musicians are doing things on their own, like very DIY. We don't have record labels as such and all of that. So yeah, it's a lot of the art scene is like that here as well, mostly illustration, what I do. So things are just kind of picking up here, and hopefully we're going to go a long way from here. Is there anything else you asked about and I missed?
No, I think you've answered it very comprehensively. You, in fact, given me a whole list of things to look up and check out, and I definitely will. I'm really looking forward to. All of them were like great suggestions that I'm going to go over after the moment this podcast ends. But as a follow-up question, I was reading about Forever South that you were mentioning. Weren't you also DJing with them?
Yes. Sadly, that was a very I always add it in my bio because it was such a big moment for me to be able to DJ. But I was like kind of in the learning process when I started DJing. I was learning how to DJ, and all the friends I had in Forever South, especially the founders of Forever South, which are my friends Bilal and Hamid. And their music names are Rudo and Dino Man. So they both still make amazing music as well. Dino is now in the States, in New York, and Rudo is based in Dubai. But they come often to Pakistan, and they're doing shows here, they're doing shows abroad. So they both really encouraged me because they they kind of saw that I have this knack for music, and I've been listening, like I was telling you, all my life, and just been inspired by these guys as well. And I think I was always a little intimidated about learning DJing and music from my partner, because he's kind of larger than life for me. But these were friends, and they kind of encouraged me, and they were more, it was easier to get pushed by them for me. And I kind of got into it, and I got to even perform at two of their events, which was like an amazing experience. But that then I kind of just sort of fell back because I got so busy with my art and my illustration. It's still something that I want to at some point pursue, and now my partner's kind trying to convince me these days to sort of get into it and learn some things from him. So let's see. I hope there's a comeback of DJ Oshia. So my artist name actually came from my DJ name, like because everyone's like, oh, now you're a DJ, so you need to have a name. And I was really excited about finding a name for myself, and I decided to keep it Oshia, which was inspired. I mean, it's kind of cringy now that I think about it, but it was inspired by oceans, because by Karachi we live by oceans, and where I was born, that's also like a sea city. So I was like, and I love the sea, basically, and the beach. So I was like, okay, I'm going to keep it Oshia. And then so I stopped DJing, but I wanted to sort of keep that name as my artist name.
That's amazing. Samya, if I were visiting you in Karachi right now, if we were doing the podcast physically, like face to face in Karachi, is there a place that you would take me?
Well, like I said, I love going to the beach. I don't know if we could do the podcast at the beach. Maybe we could, if we could sort of filter out the beach noise. But the beach is really nice. It's a place in Karachi that I really look forward to going to. Karachi is a very dry city. Otherwise, we don't have a lot of greenery, and in the summers it gets unbearably hot. And like you will probably know, I'm sure it's similar in India. We get the monsoon season in the summer, and because of that the sea becomes very rough, so you can't swim. But still, because it's so hot, you just want to be at the beach. So the beach is some place, and I've always lived very close to the beach in Karachi. So it's some place that if I want to be alone, or if I need a moment of clarity, I always go to the beach. The beach that's very close to us is a very public beach. So, it's not as clean as we wish it would be. But it's still, a place that I've grown up by, and it means a lot. So I think I would love to take you to the beach. But apart from that, I think we could also go to some nice, yummy food place. We have a lot of nice restaurants, and I think Pakistan's best food is found in Karachi, because it's this melting pot of hub of all kinds of different people, live in Karachi. It's not like one certain kind of, one kind of ethnicity that lives there. We have a lot of different ethnicities that come to Karachi, since it's the largest city and the industrial sort of backbone of Pakistan. So everyone's living here to make a living. And so we have all kinds of amazing food in Karachi. So after the beach, I definitely take you out somewhere to eat.
I'm regretting doing this virtually now. After all the suggestions, I wish I were there.
I know, seriously. So then we should do a visit to each other's cities as soon as the borders are open and friendly. And, I'd love to give you a tour whenever you're able to come to Karachi.
Thank you. Sounds great. You also grew up in
Awesome.
Karachi, right?
I grew up in Karachi, so I moved here when I was 7 years old. Before that was like the highlight of my life, which I love telling people, but it's sad that it ended when I was 7. But my dad used to work in Spain, and both my parents were based there for 10 years. And so me and my siblings were all born in Spain. But then my job didn't work out. And, my mom's been this extremely like patriotic, and I wouldn't say nationalistic, but definitely patriotic woman. And she's very close to her family. So I think that's something that she really missed while living in Spain. And so when my dad's job scene was sort of changing, she's like, let's move back to Pakistan. And so I moved back to Pakistan when I was 7 years old. And this is something that we still kind of hold against them, because, we were born there and we don't really have the nationalities or the passports. So we're like, why did you bring us back to Pakistan? Because it's just not a very easy time, I think, for Muslims and Pakistanis, to travel and, visit other places as easily as it is for people of other nationalities and other countries right now. So, and I love traveling. So I do wish that, it'd be easier for me to travel as a Pakistani and visit other places. So yeah, that I think, but I have gotten to visit Spain ever since coming back. And it was really great. I got to visit the city I grew up in, and my brother was studying there. So I've gotten to go to Spain a few times since then. So that's been nice.
I was also looking up your artwork, and one in particular caught my eye was called Women of My Land, which is again your narrative of growing up in Pakistan as a woman. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, definitely. So that's been one of my, I think, most personally successful and, just really appreciated by people project that I've done. It was also the first time that I was approached by a gallery, like a really big art gallery, and sort of they're also a museum in Karachi, to sort of exhibit my work as an illustrator. And so that's the thing, because illustration is still a very new and upcoming field in Pakistan. And fine arts has this very, it's still very traditional, and it's still very, fine arts in Pakistan, it's still very drawing room art, like people buy, paintings and put them up, and it's mostly like catering to very rich people of our, of the population. And illustration is something that when I got into it, or when I graduated and I started illustrating, there were barely any illustrators in Pakistan. I could probably count them on one hand, the ones I knew of. And it's been like 12 years almost, wow, since I've graduated. But now when I every day I look, I find some new Pakistani person who's doing illustration, and that's just amazing. But going back to that project, sorry, Women of My Land. So that was the first time that a gallery approached, and it was mostly because of this fine artist by the name of Adilo Zafar. He makes beautiful, amazing, very minimalist art, and he has a very definite style of what he works on. And he had been seeing my work for a while, and he, decided to push me ahead. And I really appreciate that, because I think he's one of those few people who are really high up in the fine art world in Pakistan, who are also trying to push ahead people who work in different mediums, and also push contemporary art ahead in Pakistan. So this was one of those moments. And, he approached me. And when he approached me, he's like, think about all the sort of work that you've done so far, and what do you want to talk about, and in what format do you want to talk about. So I think if you have a look at my work, most of the times this is something that I strongly feel about my own experiences as a woman and as a girl growing up in Pakistan, and also the cultural and political and sort of societal issues that affect us as women in Pakistan. So that's something I feel very strongly about. And I've, over the years been making art on this subject. And so, and then when I looked at the other aspect of my work, which is more commercial, where I do projects for clients and other people, music is something that's really, something that I love making art for. And I see it more as a collaboration with the musician, whoever has made music, like to hear their music and then visualize it. I love that process. So that's where this entire project came out because I wanted to talk about my experiences as women and combine that with music. And like I was talking about it earlier, that's where my partner Talha and my friend Huma came. So we made these songs, and there were these 6 artworks and 6 songs, and then there was each artwork representing each song. And each sort of artwork is about my sort of a different facet of my experience as a Pakistani girl and woman. So there's one called Fast Girls. And like I was telling you, in my family, I've often been branded this term, for being independent, for being rebellious, or for just not following the, straight path that maybe my other women cousins did. Um, and so, I just wanted to own up this term. And then smoking is also like, with my family, when they found out I was smoking, they were more concerned about what people will say, log kya kahenge, which is that term we hear often from our elders in our society. And so I was like, well, aren't you more concerned about my health? And that's where the Fast Girl artwork comes from, where it's actually kind of in front of me right now. So I'm looking at it. But it's just me looking defiantly at the viewer, and I'm smoking a cigar. And then the song for it is also like about fast girls and, like driving cars and being cool and independent. And then the other artwork that got really popular from that series is called Cosmic Ninja. And that was about religion. And that was very much inspired by these 2 twin sisters who make art. And they're from this little city called Thatta, which is like neighboring to Karachi. Right now they're in art school. They're really young. So they're like in their early 20s and they're in art school. But they've been making art and writing poetry for a long time. And a lot of their work is inspired by, Islam or being Muslim and their experiences as a Muslim woman. And I think there's a very distorted view of Muslim women, like out in the, global world. Obviously, I think generally Muslims are facing a lot of backlash these past few years, but then Muslim women more so. I think there's an opinion out there that we're just very submissive women, or we're all like sort of wearing hijabs, or there's like a certain persona that we all follow. But I don't think that's true. And even if you do wear hijab, or even if you are religious, I think there's lots of those women who are doing amazing things while doing that, who are doing groundbreaking, ball breaking things. And they're also sexual, and they're also amazing, and they're funny, and they're, independent. So I wanted to put this image of a Muslim woman out there who's more than just what she wears, and I think a lot of times we're judged for not wearing a scarf, and a lot of times we're judged for wearing a scarf. So it's hard to sort of find the middle ground, I think, within our country as well and outside as well. So this is something I wanted to do. Like there's like a sort of religious woman, but she's also playful, and she's eating this sort of ice cream cone, which is the image for Cosmic Ninja. And even the song is about a woman having the right to practice her own religion as she wants, like any religion. And any woman should be allowed to do that. So these were just 2 of the artworks which I think got more popular from the series. And then Cosmic Ninja also ended up being featured on 2 book covers, which was amazing. Like one of them is by this Pakistani author, Sabine Javeri, and it was for her book Hijabistan, which was again about, Muslim women and how wearing a hijab and covering yourself is part of our everyday lives, or not wearing a hijab is also something that's questioned from us about sorry sorry and what I mean, like we're questioned about the hijab, like even if we're not wearing it. So yeah, that's I think the story behind Women of My Land. It's still a series that I would love to continue. So I did this workshop with British Council in Nepal, where all these amazing illustrators came from South Asia. There was Sri Lankan illustrator by the name of Isuri, who does amazing like work. And then there were these 3 Nepali illustrators, and we all met in Kathmandu. This was back in 2018. And I kind of continued this series with the zine we made. And then I made some more different kinds of women who I feel are, part of the entire women's scape of Pakistan.
That's very interesting. And I think that comes across in your work also. I noticed it's very funky, playful, rebellious, loud, and sort
Yeah.
of unabashedly feminist, which is why I love it. I love the aesthetics also. And you have a very distinctive style. Like if I look at your work, I immediately know it's coming from you. And there is a sort of um, quality to it. So which is why I wanted to learn more about how you sort of reached this. How did you adapt this style? How did you curate a sort of individualistic style for yourself? um, and when and how did you even choose to be an artist or a designer? And you're all of it, right? You're an illustrator, you're a visual artist, and a graphic designer, so you juggle all of these things together.
Yeah.
So was there any important moment, or sort of a highlight in your life, or how did you decide you wanted to be an artist?
I think art is something that I've always been into. Like, I was just one of those kids, who loved drawing, who loved making art since I was a young girl. And I was lucky enough for my parents to be very extremely encouraging of it. Um, but I think for my parents, because they're Desi parents, and we're basically like middle class parents, I think it was really important for my parents that I be financially independent. And because they were coming from another generation, and also because I think they didn't have that much information at their disposal, of what the future is of art in Pakistan, or what I was interested in at that point. They really pushed me towards architecture, because in their head that this was one field in art that would guarantee me some sort of like fame and success. And they thought I'll be financially all right and independent, and it would guarantee a job. And they're both like they're both appreciators of art and architecture. They got to live 10 years in Spain, so they got to travel all over Europe, and I think that instills some sense of art and the appreciation of art in them. So I was lucky enough to have those parents who recognize that interest in me and always encourage. Like my mom, I can remember her spending afternoons upon afternoons with me where we were just coloring or drawing things. So she was really encouraging that way. But what they wanted me to do was architecture. And so basically all my life, I kind of thought that, I'll become an architect. And they had kind of built it up really big in my head as well. Um, but when it came time to go for university, they had promised me that they'll send me abroad. And when the time came, this was something I really craved, because I was always craving independence from an early age. And they weren't able to send me then, because I was the only daughter and the eldest child. So, I think they felt kind of protective towards me, and they weren't sure about sending me abroad. And they're like, no, we have good art schools here, so go, study. And then, yes, we do have two really amazing art schools in Pakistan. One is based in, and these are, I mean, we do have some new art schools as well that have come up over the last few years. But these two that I'm going to mention, one in Lahore, which is actually it has existed before partition. It is the oldest sort of art university in Pakistan, by the name of National College of Arts. So it's called NCA, and it's based in Lahore. And it's a great school for all kinds of subjects, mostly I think for fine art, and I think filmmaking is good there as well, but fine art is one of their sort of big subjects. And then, like in the early 90s, we had the first art school in Karachi open, like the first proper university, by the name of Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture. And that's where I graduated from. And short form, it's called IVS. And so their architecture department is amazing, and their design department is really good. And even the textile department is really great at Indus Valley. And so my parents kind of, they're like, just go to this art school. And I went there and I started studying architecture, and my heart was not into it at all. I was always looking at the people who were doing the drawing classes, and I was just like, why am I here? And even though I had this like very basic interest in architecture, but once I started studying it, I realized that, there's so much within architecture that you sort of need to be open to if you're going to study architecture, and you kind of really need to be passionate about, because it's not an easy subject. Like, I feel you have to be really passionate about being a doctor, because there's so much to study and there's so much to know. So, I mean, a lot of people just kind of go through it, and then they don't, um, they don't follow up on that as a career, or take it up as a career and then sort of branch into other things. So I didn't want to do that. And I kind of confronted my parents at that point, which was kind of scary, because all my life they were convinced I was going to be an architect. And I think it was a kind of a big letdown for them when I kind of very surprisingly told them that, architecture is not something I want to study at all, and my heart's not into it. And I kind of use them not sending me abroad as a reason to not study architecture, because I was like, okay, so you didn't send me abroad, now let me at least study what I want to study. And so I think at that point, what I actually really wanted to study was fine art. But I knew if I went from architecture to fine arts, my parents would have a heart attack because there was too much of a jump. So instead, I decided to study design, because with design, it's you're more likely to get jobs in companies and, advertising agencies, and have a 9 to 5, which is, I think, what the sort of in my parents' head, that was the route to success, to have a proper job and do it. And they, I was the first in my family to study and like sort of make it as an artist and as an illustrator. So all of what I've done is very new for my parents. So anyway, I told them I want to study design, and design is still something, because it also at our university encapsulated, there was printmaking in it, there was illustration, there was filmmaking, and there was also there was another subject. But anyway, so I decided, and photography. So anyway, and then so I came into design, and then once I started studying design, it was just like a whole world that opened up, because there's typography and there's graphic design, and then there's advertising. So all of that was just something that I loved learning about. And I think it's also more practical when you think about it as compared to fine art. With fine art, it's kind of just about your journey as an artist and the subject that you've picked and how you travel with that subject over the years as an artist. While as an illustrator, I think we get to work on a combination and a collection of different, topics and themes that we feel strongly about. And while we also get to make our personal art, we also get to collaborate with, other companies, other individuals. So it's really exciting that way. So I'm really glad in the end that I did choose design, and I studied design at Indus Valley for 4 years. It was a great experience. I didn't take illustration though, even then, as a subject, because I mean, unfortunately, the teacher who taught illustrator didn't like me too much, and I didn't like her either. And so I decided to study photography instead. And that was great as well, because I feel because of that, I have sort of knowledge of how a lot of these different things work. But at the same time, I was able to keep illustration as my main interest. So a lot of times, if I would get design projects or typography projects, I'd find some way to, include illustration in it. And that's kind of what went forward also once I graduated there. At that time, when I graduated, there was probably from zero, few to zero jobs that you could get as an illustrator. So I decided to join a digital agency where I worked as a web designer. So then I learned web design as well. And I've created like quite a few websites over the years. But even then, I think all my employers saw my interest in illustration, and if on the side they would get some small project with illustration, that had illustration in it, they would push it my way. And so I kept doing illustrative work. I graduated in 2010. Until 2016, I had all these jobs where I would, be working as a creative manager, for example, for a chocolate company. I did that for 2 years. That was my last job. I worked for NGO that worked with disabled people of Pakistan. So I did a lot of design work for them over the years. And I've also been teaching. So I've been teaching at the Arts University I graduated from, and there's a new Arts University that's open in Karachi. So I've been teaching there as well. That's something that I love doing as well. And I think just working over the years on illustrations has helped me to develop my style, which was your earlier question as well. That is something that I was really concerned about when I graduated and when I started out as an illustrator. Because obviously Instagram, while it's extremely inspiring and every day you can find like 10 amazing illustrators and artists doing like hundreds of amazing things, I think it's also very intimidating, because when you're just looking at all these amazing people doing amazing work with their very definitive style, I think it would always make me feel a bit insecure and question my work a lot, like in the beginning. And I didn't let it like undeter me, but that feeling was there always. And so I think that was a concern. But I've realized over the years, while I was working on illustrations, like you mentioned, a lot of people tell me, I don't know if I can still see it, but a lot of people tell me like, oh, we recognized your work immediately, because we saw it and the colors you use. And a lot of my friends, point out elements like I draw a lot of lips a lot of times, and I do a lot of tongues, and I do a lot of eyes. I love like drawing eyes. That's something I've been doodling since I was a kid in my copies and school books. But so I think, and I know a lot of young illustrators. So if anyone who's young and who is, sort of getting into this field, I think that's a concern for them always. But I always give my example that, I wasn't even formally schooled in illustration. It's something that I've learned on my own completely. Like, yes, I did go to an art school, but I never had illustration as a subject. So whatever I've explored and learned so far has been on my own. And I think while you keep working at it, a style develops. I think that's just human nature. Your own style starts developing. I think in the beginning, I used to be very experimental. Like, I love so many different styles that whatever project I would get, I would be like, okay, now for this, I'm going to try out something new. And now I'm at this place where I'm like, okay, I'll try something new. But even if I do that, I think a little bit of my style does end up, sort of appearing through that effort or whatever I'm doing. I think that's just part of how I work now. So I think it's great. Like, I would love to obviously develop my style much more. I was really hoping to apply for masters this year. I don't know. I need a complete scholarship for it. So one of the scholarships didn't work out, sadly, but I'm going to keep trying. And I really, I would love to do a master's in illustration to sort of get that, finesse in my work and learn the things that I wasn't able to learn about illustration in school. And so let's fingers crossed for that.
I hope you go and pursue your master's in whatever subjects you'd like to do. It's very interesting that you mentioned your formative years of training of pursuing design at the Indus Valley School. So I just wanted to ask you do you think, Samya, that going to an art school or receiving formal training is an important part of being an artist?
It really, to be honest, depends from person to person. I think some people like, I always think that I'm one of those people who really need someone to sit with me. I like that, I kind of respond to people teaching me and sitting with me and telling me things one-on-one, and that's something I enjoy, and that's how I like to learn, I think. But for example, my partner is great on learning things on his own. He's never gone to a music school. I'm sure he's had mentors who were musicians and maybe, imparted some knowledge to him. But mostly overall, from how I've seen him, learn, he just goes, on the internet and YouTube, and he'll find some videos and then he'll practice and then read about it. And he's great that way. So I think some people are just inherently really good at learning things themselves and expressing themselves. And for those people, I think art school is definitely not necessary. And even otherwise, I think a lot of times, like I have this friend who's doing amazingly as a Pakistani artist these days. He's been exhibiting all over Pakistan. His name is Faizan Reedinger. And he never even went to university, he's just basically learned things on his own. He's a musician as well, and a great musician. And art is just something he always, like me, he was always drawing, he was always passionate about it, and he's been learning on his own. And over the course of, I think, 3-4 years, he's just been making, a lot of beautiful art, and it's kind of matured in, because he's been making it for so many years. Over the years, it's matured. And and I think you do need luck in this aspect also, especially if you're an artist who hasn't gone to art school, because I think one of the things that art school gives you also, apart from the technical skills and the knowledge, you get to make contacts in the art world, wherever you've studied. You get to sort of know who to interact with, to sort of put your art forward. You get to know of other artists, who you've studied with, or who your seniors and juniors who you can collaborate with. So there are all these sort of, opportunities for collaboration or for connections. And someone who hasn't gone to an art school, I think it's harder for them that way. Especially because the art world, I think these days globally even, is so competitive, and it's almost ruthless. Like one day you can be like not making any money as an artist, and the next day you can sell a painting for $1 million, and then you're the next big thing. So I think it's kind of hard that way to sort of put your work forward, but it's not impossible. And I think over the years, time and time again, we see so many amazing artists come up who have not had any formal training, who have not gone to an art school. And and a lot of times, I think, especially with contemporary art, or art that is, not like just a perfect realist painting, I think now it's more about expression. It's not about being perfect, it's about how you're expressing. And if that sort of connects a chord with someone, if two people love your art, I think you're a successful artist. You were able to reach out to two people. So as far as schooling goes, I don't think it's completely necessary. I do think it's a plus point if you get to go to an art school, but it's definitely not absolutely necessary.
You're listening to The Pathmakers, an interview series by the Blahcksheep featuring people that make and shape a country.
How would you describe the environment for artists in Pakistan? Are there enough opportunities in terms of funding or displaying your work? Or what are the kind of challenges that you face as an artist?
So, like I was mentioning before, I feel like definitely we do have, I think art is very much flourishing in Pakistan, which is great. And I'm really appreciative of and grateful of that fact. We do have a lot of art galleries in each major city. We have a lot of platforms, like, the Karachi Biennale started out a few years ago, and then we have the Lahore Biennale as well, where they, have a lot of artists coming from internationally and exhibiting in our cities, and a lot of local artists whose works have been exhibited, who maybe we didn't know about before. So a lot of, especially in my lifetime, I'm seeing this transition and change happen, where a lot of other things are starting out. And, like I mentioned, illustration is now being recognized, and it's coming up as a field of art here. So definitely things are in the works. But at the same time, I feel like the art world here is really guarded by, these sort of elderly artists who've been artists for what seems like centuries, and it's a very, you also need to know the right people, which I a lot of times, like artists who are coming from really small cities, or who haven't had that art schooling that we just talked about, I think it's hard for them to break through into this fine art market. And I wish and I hope that starts to change as well, so that we can be more inclusive and include all sorts of people in the country who are making art and all different forms of art, not just have these beautiful paintings which rich people can buy and put in their drawing rooms. And that's another thing that I feel negatively about a little bit, is that art is mostly accessible to a certain, strata of the population, which sort of like the higher middle class or the upper class. It's mostly accessible to them. And that's something that I, feel sad about, because art should be accessible to everyone, and I think more so for the working class of the country, because I think they need it more than rich people who are going to put a painting in their drawing room and not look at it twice. And that's something I felt so strongly about when I visited Europe. Like after coming back to Pakistan when I was 7 years old, I got to go back to Europe when I was 28. So there was this huge gap, and I didn't travel much like in the Western world during that gap. Like I just got to go to Nepal or Thailand. It's mostly Asia. So, but when I first went to Europe, and my first sort of city that I visited, and a city that I'm extremely in love with, is Berlin. Um, it was just like this beautiful slap on my face when I visited Berlin the first time. It's like a city just full of like young people, and everyone has some kind of affiliation with some form of art. Like either someone's a DJ or a musician or a sculptor or a performance artist, and you meet all these really interesting people from all over the world in Berlin. It's like this really cultural, hot pot of people from all over the world. And it just felt so enriching to have that experience. And the first time I went to Berlin, it was for this illustration workshop. And that's the first time I kind of took a course in illustration, to formally study it. And it was a very short 2 weeks course, but it was just so enriching. And that experience, like first time, in a city where women can walk safely at night, which is something I feel strongly about as well. Like, because in Pakistan as women, we don't get to claim public spaces. Like we don't easily go, or the public spaces are not easily accessible to us. And when I traveled as a 28-year-old woman for the first time, and I was able to do whatever I want, walk wherever I want, and then just to be able to see art everywhere on the streets of Berlin, it was such a beautiful experience. Like I was just constantly taking photos of every street, because there was just art on every street, and it was there for all kinds of people, immigrants and the, white people and the colored people, and there were women and men and children, and there was art everywhere. And that just made me feel like I would love it if we could have this in Pakistan. And I think I've been seeing like there's a lot of public art that's been happening in India, especially with this platform that's called Start India, and they do a lot of these different huge murals all over cities in India, and they get amazing artists to do it. And that's something I really hope I can start in Pakistan with some of my fellow illustrators, and especially women, because you don't get to see us in public spaces. And if we could just enter these public spaces and paint them up and express ourselves, I think that would be amazing. So I definitely wish there was more public art, and there was more art for the average person in Pakistan. And I think we do have the means of doing it, but someone needs to sort of make the first move. So let's see how that goes.
I'm so glad that you mentioned accessibility and art, because I think that is an important discussion that we need to have. But I also wanted to get your thoughts on this. So do you think, Samya, newer technology like blockchain technology can actually resolve the problem of accessibility? Can we reach out to more people through, say, NFT-based art? Because a lot of artists are now experimenting with it, and they want to have more ownership and agency and assert that over their body of work, right? What are your thoughts on that? Or is there any excitement for NFT-based artwork in Pakistan?
There definitely is, and that's a great thing that you mentioned, because I think it's mostly the illustrators community that's sort of taking in it, but I do see some fine artists also participating in it. To be honest, it's still something that I feel I need to learn more about. I do have a general overview about NFTs and, the entire sort of online market that's being created to cater to that. But I definitely need a proper lesson into that so I can be more aware of how it works and how to sort of do it the right way, because I think a lot of people also have issue with the carbon footprint it leaves behind, and of how it might not be all it might not just be like a great thing, but there might be some negative aspects to it as well. But in terms of what you were talking, like it making art more accessible to people, and then also like helping artists hold on to the rights of their work, and in terms of that, I think it's a great thing. And yes, there's definitely a lot of excitement about it in Pakistan. I've been approached like by 3-4 artists, Pakistani artists themselves, who want to sort of collaborate on NFT projects. And so I just kind of told them the same thing, that I want to learn more about it, and then get back to them and see how I can sort of participate in that. But I do think it's especially for people who make digital art. And like I said, there's like a lots of people who you'd find in Pakistan doing that now and exploring that sort of medium of art. I think for those of us, and also because, like I mentioned, that the fine art scene is very much guarded in Pakistan by certain, people of higher rank. So I think that this sort of NFT ground would help us break that, because then we don't need the galleries or those platforms to push us. Then we can sort of own these platforms in our own ways and push our work ahead. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to find out more about it, and hopefully I'll be sharing an NFT this year at some point.
That's great. I look forward to that.
Great, thank you.
You've also done a lot of artwork for Aurat March. In fact, that was one of the places that I discovered you from. So I'd like to know if, yes, I wanted to know if what your experience was at these Aurat Marches, and if you'd like to talk about it. Yeah, did you attend the one this year?
Yes, I attended the one this year after like a break of 1 year. I wasn't able to attend the one last year. But just the Aurat March is something amazing that's happened, in Pakistan. We used to have a lot of, organizations and women's rights based organizations in Pakistan. Initially, when Pakistan started out, I mean, when Pakistan was created, basically, in the 40s and the 50s, I think up till the 60s, until we fell under dictator rule. And then all these sort of organizations and political parties were banned. But there has been an uprising again. And I think this has been due to the fact that almost every day, if you open the newspaper, there are like minimum like 1 to 2 stories about some form of violence against women. And there was a long period of just, like no work being done for women's rights, or no one really fighting for us, or no one really speaking out about all this violence that has been building up against us in our own country. And so the Aurat March was started to sort of talk about these things and bring all the women and the trans people and the minorities and people of LGBTQIA, who sort of come from that, and then bring them all together and talk about our rights collectively. And like I mentioned, being a woman and just someone who always seeks her own independence, this has been something extremely important for me to be a part of. I mean, the first Aurat March that I got to attend, it was the first Aurat March that happened. I think that was in 2017 or 18, if I'm not wrong. That was just such a beautiful experience. I think I still don't know how to put it in the right words, because it was such a powerful experience for me as a woman in Pakistan as a woman living in the city, Karachi. It's a huge city. And like I said, it's not at all easily accessible for me. Whenever I go out, there are 100 things that I think about. How am I going? Who's looking at me? What am I wearing? Do I have my phone? Is it charged? Is anyone following me? So there's so much on my mind that I have to sort of. But the Aurat March, when I attended the first time I went, I think it was the first time I saw so many women together in one space. And it was the first few years, it was held at this very public sort of, it used to be like a church, but then it was converted into a sort of art center. And it's called Fair Hall, and it has this huge like garden sort of public space, which, mostly if any day you're passing by, you'll just see like groups of men sitting around it. But for this one day, for the first time, there were like hundreds of women and trans people and LGBTQ people and just very few men. And there was such a beautiful feeling of just companionship and unity, and all of us chanting slogans. And so many like women had created these amazing posters, which were like, which is another topic, because there was a lot of backlash against the posters. A lot of things that women were saying, just like when they were put on news, on the news or on newspapers, like there was a lot of backlash. Like men were just, I think this is especially from men who were like, or the fanatics or people were really judging women for, why are they asking for their rights? They have everything, but they don't realize what a woman in Pakistan is fighting every day. And even like our laws, a lot of times don't support us, especially in the cases of rape or, adultery or things like, a woman getting her rightful share in inheritance and things like that. A lot of our laws don't support us. And so the Aurat March is like protesting and sort of demanding our rights, like protesting against these unfair laws and demanding our rightful rights. So it's been an amazing platform, I think, for all of us women who've been. And I think that after the first Aurat March that happened in Karachi, got picked up hugely all over Pakistan. And so now this was its 5th year of Aurat March. So that would make it, it was the 5th Aurat March this year, and I attended. And so now it's happening in every major city of Pakistan, and even in the smaller cities, it's happening now. And, it's a day where we all sort of get out and, we were together and we're fighting for it. And a lot of things that are being spoken about are being noticed by our legislators and politicians. So hopefully that will be, that will enable us to sort of change how this patriarchal system has operated so far. Of course, it's not going to happen now or even in a few years. I hope it does happen in some years. But it's good at least that we're not quiet in our homes all the time now. At least there's one day in the year that we can all go out and shout about what's, the wrong that are being committed against us, and also demand our rightful sort of thing. So each time I've been able to take some poster artwork, that I've created over the years. And it's mostly been my own art. But this year I was officially asked by the Aurat March organizers in Karachi to create a poster, and it was based on marriage and labor. And so I kind of made this woman who has 8 arms, and she's doing 8 different things in the house. And it was basically how, as women, a lot of the onus of like the house labor is placed on us. Just because we're women, it's expected of us that we're going to be the ones cleaning the house and cooking, and men just kind of expect that. I think it's a very it's like kind of inlaid in our society and culture, and it's very unfortunate, because a lot of times women are working as well, like working women, but then they're expected to come home and do all the house errands as well, while the husband just comes home and relaxes, takes off his shoes and he's done with the day. But it's not the same for women, and that's what I wanted to highlight in my poster. And it's not just that, there's emotional labor as well. So then one of the hands is wiping a tear away from, a man's tear. And so we're used as sort of vessels for the emotional labor that's invested in our families, in our relationships. So I feel that there's too much pressure on us and not enough space for us to express ourselves. And that was something that was important for me to sort of show in my artwork.
I completely agree with everything that you raised. I mean, all of those are very important discussions, which I think during the pandemic, women have tried to raise even more, especially now that everybody was caught up at home. I think domestic violence or the emotional labor or work that you put in behind closed doors was sort of an uncomfortable issue that resurfaced, but it's always been long-standing nonetheless. Um, we have we've almost reached the end of our podcast, but there's this one last question that I'd like to ask you, and I'm very excited to know what you're going to say, because this is one question that's been common throughout all the episodes. So everybody has had their take on this one particular question. So I'm very excited and looking forward to what you have to say, which is, what is your idea of a perfect Pakistan? As an artist, how do you see the country in the next 10 to 20 years?
I mean, the Pakistan of my dreams, I think looks wise, it is a country of my dreams. It's a beautiful country. We're so lucky to, even have this sort of little country, but it's a beautiful country. We have all kinds of landscapes, and we have a lot of beautiful people also. I think that's something that's easy to forget when you're looking at the news and every day you're just being thrown negative things about our country and what's going on. But when you go on the street and you talk to the, average woman or man, and you can have a good conversation with a person here. I think mostly Pakistanis are good people at heart. But I think what's gone wrong over the years is that, our politicians have not done right by us. I think that's the saddest thing. Like, our country's been really looted and plundered by the people who were supposed to sort of run it and care for it the most, who had the means to do that. I think they haven't cared at all. And we've never had good leadership in Pakistan. In my opinion, like, after Pakistan was created, we've not even once had a good leader. Someone who thought about the country or the people or our prosperity. We've never had that. And that's been extremely sad. And I think because of that, it's led to so many problems over the years. People have become poorer. Some people have become richer. The, economic gap is just terrible right now. And I think a lot of poverty has led to people, sort of using religion as a tool to, to sort of justify their lives, or to also justify the violence and the need for violence that they feel, whether it's against minorities or whether it's against women. And I think our country's been, that's been one of our biggest weaknesses, I think. And that I think it'd be really hard to fight that. But when we think about a dream Pakistan, I think that's what I dream of. Like, I just want all the people of Pakistan to get along much better than we do. I want us to be more tolerant of each other. I want us to be more empathetic. A lot of times, as a middle class person, I feel like I'm able to live in a bubble and not really feel what the working class of my country feels, or how hard their lives are. And whenever you're sort of whenever that's kind of put in front of you, I think a lot of times you don't know how to deal with that. But for that, I think we need to sort of get out of our bubbles, get out of our homes, interact more with the city, interact more with the people, and take some sort of ownership of our cities, because since, like I said, none of our leaders have done right by us. So maybe now we can't wait for the leaders to do right by us. We need to kind of take things into our own hands. And like Aurat March, if we kept waiting for some woman leader or some politician to realize our rights, maybe we would have been waiting forever. But I think at some point, the women of the country realized that, this can't keep happening. We need to sort of get together and raise our voices. And that's been a beautiful change. And I'm so happy that I'm alive to sort of witness that and be a part of it. And just like that, I wish there are other things that we all feel strongly about, like poverty and, about a lot of things in Karachi. There's so much there's so many issues in Karachi, there's education, there's, the sewage, there's like cleanliness, there's the infrastructure of the city. There's just so much to sort of work on. And I think for that, we just need to sort of start doing things more on our own. And I hope that starts happening at a point. And I really hope that, people stop using religion as a sort of tool to viciously rile people up for no reason, to use it as a tool to hurt other people. And we often, like when I was talking about, like, it's a really hard time for Muslims, right now in the world globally, like, everywhere you see a lot of the Muslim countries are under war or some kind of conflict. And I feel strongly about that, but then we should look within ourselves as well. Like, if we're going to cry about like how Muslims are being treated globally, like what about how do we treat our minorities within our own countries? A lot of times the Christian or the Hindu people or even other sects of Islam that exist within Pakistan are under attack. And I don't know, like, how these fanatic people think. Like, do they think it would be amazing if the whole world was just similar and the same and practice one kind of religion in one way? Like, I think that would make things extremely sad and boring, and there would be no creativity, there would be no originality, there was so many things would stop existing, if they were to sort of vacuum individuality or uniqueness or all of that, and just basically we need to sort of live and let live. And I really hope, like, I don't know, I'm not an extremely positive person. Like, I can be quite kind of negative. I was being negative about this last night to my mom, and she's like, okay, then why don't you just leave the country and go live with because a lot of her family lives abroad, and she's like, just go live with them. And I was like, now I can't go. You brought me here from Spain when I was 7. Now I'm just stuck here, and now that I'm here, and I think I used to yearn leaving Pakistan more when I was younger, but as I'm growing older, there's a lot that I feel and empathize with. And I think more than I show, I do feel this kind of, like ownership of my country and my people and my city, which I don't really get to express much. And I would love to sort of start doing that and just, yeah, be a part of the change, basically.